Hey guys, what's up? Caleb Downing here, and today we're going to go over the Mark II stripped lower receiver from Griffin Armament. Let's get into it. Alright, so yes, we get things from Griffin Armament sometimes, and this is one of those things. They sent this out. I did request it because I noticed it, and I was like, that is really cool, and I really have some ideas that I want to put this thing together and run it on a bunch of stuff. So they were cool with it, so they sent it out. So I did not pay for this. So if what I say about this as far as it's good and it's bad and all these things, if you got to take it with a grain of salt, take it with a grain of salt. But as always, we give our most unbiased opinion as possible. All right, I'm not going to get further into that. You know my spiel on that, so let's get into it. Alright, so a couple specs for you. This is made out of 7075 T6 aluminum. It has ambidextrous magazine release and bolt catch and release controls. It is hard coat Type 3 anodized with a black finish, Mil-Spec fire control pocket, 60-degree mag well, premium in-machine deburring and deflashing, and integrated trigger guard. So you would want to look at this and say, okay, that's simple. Well, it is simple as far as if you just read the specs. But when you really start to look at this lower, you see that they put some attention to detail. And again, in a way, I wish I hadn't got this receiver for free, because if I say that, people are like, oh, you're just saying stuff because you're trying to say stuff and stay in the good graces of whatever. But no, if you really start looking at this receiver, you can tell that this is not just a Mil-Spec lower receiver or even a somewhat normal billet lower receiver that they just threw some extra parts and pieces on. No, they actually took time and effort to design and manufacture this to what it looks like it's going to appear to function better than if they just slapped extra pieces on it. All right, so yes, it is Mil-Spec in some degree, where it can take pins and pieces and parts and your triggers and all that kind of stuff, but it starts deviating from that Mil-Spec standard, right? Kind of, in a way. I hope I said that right. But it does have, it says a 60-degree mag well, so a larger mag well, which why would anybody who makes a billet lower receiver go with a standard mag well? I have no idea. I'm glad they didn't. They opened it up enough to where it's not dramatic, but it's enough to help ensure feeding those magazines in there. The integrated trigger guard, I like it. I really do like it. It's large enough for if you're wearing gloves and whatnot, but it's not so big and obnoxious that it's just going to look just ugly and whatnot. I hope that makes sense. Again, the fire control pocket, that is interesting. That's where stuff starts to really deviate. I don't know how well it will show, and maybe I'll need to take some pictures or just zoom in. It might actually work if I just zoom in. But this does appear to be what should be the standard Mil-Spec fire control pocket, meaning you should be able to put your registered full auto sears in here, or if you're a manufacturer or law enforcement, you should be able to drill your hole, put your sear in here, and have fun with this. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. This does not appear to be a semi-automatic cut that most people are using. I don't know why most people are using those. I don't know, but it's nice that they are using this style of pocket. Right on them. I think that's awesome. So moving on to some more specific stuff that I'm talking about. This ambidextrousness of this lower receiver, it's in the bolt stop bolt release, right? It's ambidextrous, and also the magazine release. And you're looking at this and you're like, well, there is no magazine release over here. It says it on their website. They do not provide the Mil-Spec magazine release on the right-hand side. However, the left-hand side, this little guy right here, right, he is already installed. So all your proprietary special pieces and parts, they're already pre-installed, right? So you don't have to worry about that and scratch everything up and trying to get everything to fit right. It's already installed. And something that I would note personally, especially after having put together plenty of lowers and even putting my own lowers together with my name on them and all this stuff, and milling and filing and fitting special pieces and parts like the PDQ. I love the PDQ Ambi bolt stop bolt release, but I recently had somebody who had one of my guns, and he was having troubles with that bolt stop bolt release, just slightly out of spec, to where it would most of the time have a last round bolt hold open, but sometimes it wouldn't, and that was due on my build that I messed up in the fact that that piece, that bolt stop bolt release, was had too much wiggle to it. This guy on here, and what I mean by that is this piece here, if it wiggles back and forth like this and is pivoting too much like this, it's out of spec, meaning it's got way too much wiggle to it, because a little bit of wiggle it starts to accumulate really, or accelerate really fast as far as too much wiggle, it being too much wiggle. And what happens, basically what I'm trying to say is that little tooth right here, if that little tooth does not catch the follower on your magazine, then you're not going to get reliable last round bolt hole open, which is what I was having that trouble with. What is nice to see on this blower, the rabbit trail I'm trying to get to, is that this does have just enough movement to where it's not rubbing on things. It doesn't feel like it's gritty and grinding and rubbing on things, so it should be reliable as far as function goes, but it's not so wiggly that it's going to be out of spec and miss that follower and fail to have last round bolt open. Now I'm saying all that without having fired this, so later on in the future as we get to fire this thing and test it and everything, hopefully we will be able to confirm or deny that. But from what I'm seeing, the attention to detail is there. I think they really thought about that. Another attention to detail thing is they use a lot of pins instead of screws. Now screws, it would seem that little screws and set screws and stuff to hold everything in place, it would seem like that would be a better thing because it's easier to just throw a bunch of Loctite on that, torque everything down and call it good. But again, in my experience, when you have a lot of those pieces that have screws, under recoil and when you fired enough rounds, vibrations and stuff happen and pieces come out. I've had some of these systems, not from Griffin Armament, but from some other systems or manufacturers, the pin that holds your ping pong paddle right here, that has been a screw in some lowers that I've had, and they have worked themselves out even after I put Loctite on them. So I'm glad they're using pins. I don't know if they did that on purpose because of that, but in my experience, not my opinion, but in my experience, pins just don't walk out as easy as screws do. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's just my opinion. Or not my opinion, that's my experience. One thing I wish they did have after talking about screws is they did not thread this little hole back here for your detent and spring for your rear takedown pin. That one I do like to have threaded and tapped so that you can run a little set screw in there so that whenever you get everything assembled, you can take your back plate off or your end plate off and that spring doesn't go popping and flying out. That's not going to come out under recoil because you have pieces holding that in, like the end plate. I wish they did have that. That would have been a nice little attention to detail that I wish they did have. They don't. Not the biggest deal in the world. It's just something I like to look for. Something else that they don't have that some people may wonder is there is no tension screw back here. I'm not sure if that has to do with the size of the fire control pocket. I don't think so. I don't think it has anything to do with that. And honestly, that's not something that I use. I really don't use that very much, even on the builds that I have that has those. I don't take the time to do that because I'm always swapping uppers and I'm not going to take off the pistol grip to adjust everything. So it's no skin off my nose if they don't have it, but I'm sure somebody will ask at some point down the road. But these lowers do not have that. Maybe other ones down the road will, but these ones don't. So enough talking and whatnot. That was a lot of words. Too long, didn't read. This is a cool looking, very well thought out lower receiver. So let's head over to the desk. I'm going to put some pieces and parts in this because since this is a quality lower receiver, I want to try to build this thing out to be able to utilize on as many styles, calibers, and builds as I can. So we're going to put some pieces and parts in this that it should allow me to be able to do that. All right, so let's head over to the desk and let's do it. All right, so for pieces and parts, we're using primarily an Anderson lower receiver parts kit. My experience, again, they are Mil-Spec, they work, there's nothing super crazy good or bad about them, they just simply work, and that's what I'm looking for, something that works. For the trigger, this one is a little bit different. This is the SSTAT, this guy right here from AIM Surplus. Never had one of these triggers, but it is a single stage trigger, a nice flat trigger, which again, I haven't used those in lower receivers, so we're gonna try that. And then the pistol grip, that's an ergo grip, it's more of a lot more of a vertical grip and it's smaller and slimmer. I'm kind of going to that style nowadays. I really like that. And then to complete the package, we're going with a Stern Defense RAB-AD end plate. And this is a system that really should allow these lower receivers to be able to be utilized on a whole host of different builds because you can easily and quickly pop out and switch out completed recoil assemblies. That includes your buffer, your spring, your stock, your brace, whatever it might be. It allows you to completely switch everything out in like 2 seconds. So that's what I'm going to be putting on here as the end plate, and that's going to hold everything in and be our mounting system for whatever buffer assembly we end up using. So let's get to it. The first piece I like to try to put in is that front takedown pin. That piece usually gives me so much trouble with springs and detents flying. Thankfully, this time it went in without any issue at all. Praise the Lord, that was awesome. The next piece was that magazine release, and it again went in without any problems, just pretty straightforward. This AIM surplus trigger was a little interesting. I had to go hunt down some trigger pins. It did not come with any, and I forgot to go pick some up. So thankfully I had some spares. Went ahead and put that in, and then stuck on that ergo grip and the safety. Again, everything just kind of clicked together the way that it was supposed to. Pretty easy and pretty straightforward. The next part here is the trigger. Again, since it is a drop-in trigger and it does not use anti-rotation pins, it does come with these set screws that are installed into the assembly itself, and you kind of got to go back and forth and tighten them until everything gets down nice and secure. This last portion right here is putting on that RAB-AD, just making sure everything is secured on nice and tight, and then make sure you oil everything and check it for function. Alright guys, so there you go. That is the lower receiver by Griffin Armament. This is their, I think their latest generation. This is the Mark II. Everything went together pretty seamlessly. I don't think I forgot any parts. We'll see when we go to actually fire it. The little piece on the back, the stern defense RAB-AD, it is a little tricky sometimes to get in. Make sure you put it in properly, and you do need to use the buffer retaining pin. Even though it does come with an extension, but you need to make sure you put that one in there. But again, everything went together well. Something I didn't note before is this is the same, I get the same kind of feel that I do on Aero Precision lowers as I do on this lower. And what I mean by that is almost a velvety, just a soft feel to the lower receivers, which to me screams quality and attention to detail. I'm not sure if they just douse all their lowers and their aluminum parts after they're anodized, if they just boil them off and douse them in oil, and that just makes them feel softer. But I can say on some of the much more budget lowers that I've had, whether that be Palmetto State or Anderson or whatever it might be, but the cheaper ones, they do not feel the same. They do not feel the same. They just don't. No way about it. But this is something that struck me once I started actually looking at this thing and handling it in person. You do get a very... It's not that the metal is soft. It's hard to put your finger on. When you know, you know. When you felt them, you know what I'm talking about. It just feels like quality to me. And something along with that is there are no, and even mentioned it in some of the details, the de-burring and there's D something else, but they take off all the rough edges. There's no major rough edges on here. I didn't find any tooling mark things as far as fit and finish. Some people really like those. I guarantee you after bringing this thing out and shooting it one trip, it's going to have scratches and marks on it somewhere. These are tools in my opinion, and so they're going to be used as tools. They're going to get scratched up, so this is not going to stay showroom quality, but they are going to get used. But that being said, it is nice that they come this way, not all scratched up. Very nice, very well put together. Going off on a rabbit trail there, sorry about that. But talking about de-burring everything, again, when we go out to actually fire this thing, some problems that some lowers have that are fully ambidextrous like this is you can inadvertently hit buttons and drop a magazine or stop the bolt from functioning properly. You can do things like that on some lowers. This lower has specific and very intentional fencing around these controls, and I really think they are properly spec'd out to where I don't think you're going to accidentally be pushing and bumping buttons. I really don't think so. And they're not, again, they're not sharp. They're very well honed in. It feels very good. All right, so I'm gonna stop drooling over this thing, and hopefully we'll be able to get some uppers put on here, some lowers, or this is the lower, but some buffer assemblies, we'll call it that way. I haven't figured out exactly what all I'm gonna do on this. This is more than likely gonna be SBR'd pretty quick, but before it is, here is a demonstration of that RAB-AD. What you can do, you just take on and off your complete assemblies. So I can use a little shorty. I could set one of these guys up completely for like an SBR build, right? To where you can put a nice precision stock on here, properly weighted for like an 18-inch barrel or whatever it might be, or even different calibers. I could turn this into a 9mm PCC if I wanted to, with a properly weighted system on the back, and having a quality lower that everything could fit into. This is your building block, so this is something that you probably don't want to skimp on. Unless you're just making these just for kicks and giggles and everything. But for serious work and stuff, having quality pieces seems like this is the way to go. All right, so that's it. That's the Mark II lower receiver by Griffin Armament. thanks again to Griffin Armament for sending out this Mark II. I appreciate it, and thank you all for watching. I hope you found it interesting, hope you found it helpful, and hopefully we'll catch you guys in the next video. See ya.